Wow, I can't believe it. It's the third year that I'm doing a Game of the Year video. So much has happened since the first one. I left my single channel behind. I started the new Byte with Emily and Dan together. And now look at us. We are at 200 subscribers for this YouTube channel. That is amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy New Year, everyone. Now we do know what will happen in this video, amongst many things. The ongoing love and hate relation of me to Hideo Kojima games. Talking about Destiny 2, of course. That I'm getting older every year. That I can see my gray hair coming through. And I'm losing the connection maybe to at least some folks in the audience. But nonetheless, this will be a great video. Because there's one thing I want you to know for sure. That this video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. God, I really hate this. I hate this ad. It's so bad. How can a game that's basically just on mobile afford to pay so many YouTubers basically their livelihoods to get, the in-video sponsorships? So no, this is not sponsored by Raid. I just really wanted to use this chance to say, in 2019, that was one of the most annoying ads that I saw. God. Let's begin with the actual video of the Game of the Year 2019 videos. I'll look back at what happened into 2019 and also a little bit into the future, what will come. So join me, this is your hostess, Bruni Byte, for the video games of 2019. Before we begin, just wanted to make sure, this isn't really my opinion, like objectively saying these are the best games or the worst games. This is just a collection of what I think fit into these categories, and you're welcome to put in the comments down below your own opinions and of course listicles if you want regarding our, of course, categories that we have for this video. We don't need to agree necessarily, but I hope we can open up a little bit of a discussion and see what you think alongside my own thoughts in this video here.
five?
How do you like that? I hope you like this little compilation of the video games of 2019. There were so many games released in 2019, and when I look back at the year, I was first thinking this wasn't a good year for video games. But as it turns out, it actually kind of was a really great year. We're on the cusp of a new era of console generation coming later in 2020 with the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. And there's still the same rumor going on for a Nintendo Switch Pro version. Who knows if that will also come true this year. Fun fact, if you go on opencritic.org, the site that I use for review aggregation and summary, of course, for reviews, it's very interesting to see that when you look back through the year 2019, only 700 games have actually received a review, at least from the official listings. There are way more titles. Just alone on Steam, for example, we heard that year after year there's so many more titles coming out. So my first look actually at 2019 is a more statistical one. I want to let you know, what do you think? How many more games in 2019 were released on Steam compared to 2018? Because according to Statista, we have a very interesting graph showing, of course, a lot of games being released. The latest one in 2018 is around 9,050 releases in 2018. Now, Steam Spy, the site that has the numbers for 2019, actually counts a little bit different. We have 8,234 games released in 2018, which does count in also non-gaming software, but not DLCs. And for 2019, we have 8,290 releases. So only 66 more games than in 2018. And who knows, if this trend continues, maybe even in 2020, we see for the first time after years, less games being released in 2020 than in the previous year. Interesting though, what many people did for 2020, especially, were like decade challenges, where they say, oh, me at the beginning of the decade and me at the end of the decade. And one of the many things that I saw, at least in the gaming factor, was also that we had Steam at the beginning, and at the end we had Steam, Battle.net, Origin, and so many more. It's getting a little bit out of hand, but there's at least good news coming, because actually at the end of 2019 year we finally have seen that Origin won't be the only store anymore for EA games on PC. EA will actually also start again releasing games on Steam, so yeah, that will also factor a little bit into the numbers of releases on the platform of Steam. But who knows how it will actually turn out in the end for 2020. One of the bigger moves, and I swear this is the last point before we get some extra games, is that, in case you didn't know, finally in the EU it was ruled that Steam has to allow people to resell the games. So finally, if you buy a game and think, well, it's good, but I'm done with it, you can actually go and resell it. This is a very interesting court ruling that we have seen in France, and hopefully this will move a little bit around, of course, later on also for other countries. But alright, that's it so far about statistics and things that we've seen in 2019. Let's get to the first list. And the first list is actually best of the year that I tried out but didn't finish. It's more of a, hey, this is really cool if you play it yourself, or if you haven't yet especially, we should come back and play it a little bit more later on. Alright, let's begin with Metro Exodus, and I have to say, it's an interesting game. I played it actually on Google Stadia, and I will get to Google Stadia on its own later on, but Metro Exodus, when I bought it there for like, I think 20 euros it was kind of good. It felt good to play it, the landscapes looked amazing, the story was engaging, of course. Even without playing Metro 1 and 2, the third game actually still grabbed me instantly, and I was really happy to see how things were moving along. I sadly didn't continue past my initial, playtime of it in the first evening of trying out Google Stadia and Metro Exodus. But I have to say, Metro in general is still a series that I need to sit down and play soon. I probably have the first 2 games in that series on at least 3 platforms by now. And it's just a question of time, but there's so many games coming out, as I alluded in the beginning of the video. Then also we had Anno 1800, and that is just a game series that I absolutely adore. And it's still great to see how the setting still works its magic, at least on me, because I really enjoyed playing this one. in the beta that I played. I haven't played the full release actually because I, again, couldn't set myself down to actually play more of it because I was more of a fan of games that I could finish, not basically play endlessly. Although there is a campaign, of course, but I'm always like, yeah, I could play that or could play something else. So there's a more bigger theme going over this list right now. This is actually that betas are fun because they allow you to get a quick glance, a time limiter factor to jump on a game. And if you enjoy it, great. And if you don't, you haven't invested anything actually. And if you liked it, great. And if you didn't like it, well, at least you didn't invest anything. And this time factor really makes a difference, at least when playing games under, an outdoor lifestyle. So yeah, Anno 1800 definitely a game that's also worth checking out. Now we finally come to the first smaller game that we can mention in this list of videos, Skybolt and Zack. I originally played this game in a demo at Gamescom and I immediately loved what I saw. This game is now finally released and the basic gist is it's a rhythm game. You have this little, character, Skybolt Zack, who is punching his way through the levels, and he uses his color-coded skills to either punch, upwards, center way or a bottom way through this level, and depending where he lands in this level, he can also increase the difficulty or lower it. The goal is, of course, to never touch the ground, but in the beginning you would probably touch the ground more often than you really want to. And in general, if you get the rhythm down and learn the levels a little bit better, it just feels amazing to rush through from left to right through a level without any stops really. And to the last game of the list that I tried but didn't really play more, Borderlands 3, kind of great. Some people say, oh, it's a little bit boring, it's just same of the old stuff. I kind of like what we've seen before and I really need to sit down and play it again. I just really want to play it on Steam and not on the Epic Games Store exclusively. So I guess I still have to wait until this year because I think there's a year-long exclusivity. And once that moves over to Steam, I have the whole collection on Steam, including of course also the Borderlands 1 remake, or at least remaster I think, which increased also with that quality. And then we can do a full playthrough of the Borderlands series. But until then, Borderlands 3, yeah, I get it, it's cool. And maybe you should try it as well. But for me, what I saw was great. I'm just waiting for a few things to change. Especially, again, that Epic Games Store exclusivity wasn't really that charming. Sometimes I don't do YouTube, and instead I watch YouTube. I also watch other things, but this section is about what I watch on YouTube and what you maybe should watch also in 2020. Here's 3 new YouTubers that I watched in 2019, which you may also like and that I want to recommend to you. Oh, and if you've seen actually the stuff of the people that I'll talk about, let me know which videos you like most of these 3. I'm definitely excited to see your vote in the comments down below. So at first, Terminal Montage isn't a small YouTube channel anymore. He has over 1 million views. But I still think if you have never seen a video from Terminal Montage, you should definitely check him out.
What? Hiya! You can help us? Hiya! Thank you, brave warrior! Oh my God!
His best work so far is the Something About series, where he animates classic NES and SNES era games in a new way and retells the story in a rather quick fashion with lots of sometimes random humor and sometimes so many meme and in general pop culture references that I can't just believe sometimes how ingenious they are. There's also of course original works in between, like a collaboration with another Pokemon YouTuber where they do the Pokemon Battle Royale videos. They're really interesting, and the Pokemon YouTuber that works with him on these videos also explains very well why the rules are how they are, how the winners are selected the way they are. And in general, it's a cool concept that I hope will also be explored more in 2020 with maybe different games, different aspects. We'll see. It's just a fantastic channel, and hopefully you check it out as well. For example, in the right corner upstairs. The next YouTuber I want to talk about is KingK. Now, KingK is actually someone who's very different from Terminal Montage. He's more reserved, thoughtful, and his retrospective series about many games such as the Dark Souls series, the Legend of Zelda series, the Mario game series, and recently also his Pokemon Red and Blue retrospective, more like an analysis video, is just great. His voice just really has this deep, great narrator voice that digs in about anything he talks about. His voice could tell me about anything, like a recipe, and I would still enjoy this channel.
Though it could be argued that Super Mario Galaxy borrows level design tropes from the Collectathon, it often sees you following a linear path to your objective.
So check out KingK, actually, again linked in the corner, for his great retrospective series. I really recommend, if you're a fan of Pokemon, check out that Pokemon Red and Blue retrospective. Its analysis of the system, the elements, and of course the tricks used within are really great. Now, while ThorHighHeels doesn't have the deep, gravel voice of KingK,
a friction very similar to what got Team Silent callously shut down years earlier. After all, there's no room for faces in a faceless company. No place for Hideo.
his also analysis and especially the specialization over Japanese titles is really fascinating to watch. He's the smallest channel of the three that I'm talking about, and his analytical mind really set him apart from many different other creators. I really respect his style of editing, how he uses colors and fonts to be both different but also distinct. This is not random selection of colors and fonts, this is really specific in how he wants to present title cards and different things, and I'm really moved by that. ThorHighHeels, again, both is a great analyst of games about retrospectives. For example, he just did a 10-part series of the Hideo Kojima games. Not just Metal Gear Solid, but everything the man did to tell a story throughout the 80s until recent day, with of course Death Stranding. It's a great watch, definitely check it out, and of course also check out ThorHighHeels. Besides this retrospective, he also talks about other videos and games, such as for example in his I Just Played series, where he did one about Metal Gear Wolf XD, you know, that weird remaster from the creators of Dark Souls. He's a really great package in a creator, and I really want you to enjoy his work as well. So again, check out the channel in the above corner. It feels good to do a solid shout out to others, and again, I hope you like these creators that are presented as well. For this next section, it's not really specific games that I want to put on the spot here. But especially in 2019, I really noticed I liked racing games again. Shooters to me in 2019 really got boring a little bit. It was overall still the same. I was partially missing the old times, and the new games really don't tickle me as much. But cars driving around in circles and getting each road closer to your own personal perfection while also training your skills, I don't know, that is kind of satisfying to me. Especially since last December I brought in VR into the mix. Playing on my PlayStation 4 with PSVR, GT Sports in VR was just fantastic overall. It really gave me a greater sense of how racing actually feels like in a fast car. Because the one that I have outside isn't really that fast. So in general, a big shout out to all racing games that released last year, like Grid from 2019, Dirt Rally 2.0, and also other titles like Trials Rising and the recently re-released arcade title from the Sega Ages collection, Sega Virtual Racing. Right, so I'm putting the best games of 2019 rather in the middle of this video because there's so many more things I want to talk about, but there are not necessarily directly games. There's still more coming after this, but stay tuned. We begin with
Baba Is You.
If your mind is in need of a tease, or you just want to get it working again out there, get yourself Baba Is You. This game is fantastic, and if you've never heard about it, the basic gist is that you change the rules of the puzzle in order to solve the puzzle. There's different sentences that are made, consisting one of an object, for example Baba, a little thing, I don't know, seems like an animal, and is you. You are Baba and controlling him. But you can also change it around and push other things, other words, into that rule and make it that, for example, the key is you, and you solve the puzzle by becoming yourself the key. And sometimes also different rules apply to objects, so Baba can't walk through the wall, but maybe the key can, and that is how you solve a riddle. It's really fantastic overall, and also very cute. One of the best teasers for your mind, and of course the best puzzle game of 2019 to me personally.
Untitled Goose Game.
But what if you don't want to tease your brain so much? Well, let's face it, there's also of course great games for that. Basically every game could be that. But one of the best games out there is also Untitled Goose Game. Now hear me out, I know this isn't a big game, it doesn't take long to finish in the first run, but there is actually more after the first finishing, and I really like that little surprise. You become a goose, you be the goose, and play around a little bit in the little British town that you are walking through. Play a few tricks, of course, with the local people. Cause someone to cut down a rose that's actually an award winner from your neighbor, and of course steal a bell. All the great things that are coming together in this game are both a little bit challenging because they're not that easy, but also just plain fun because you're a goose. Just honk at them and walk away. What can they do? So really big shout out to Untitled Goose Game. I personally thought while it was a small game, for the time that I played it, it was really fantastic.
Everybody's Golf VR.
I'm moving on to one of the titles that I didn't expect I would actually love this year. And this was a long year overall, as you've seen, with the PlayStation VR that I got at the end of November. I also got myself Everybody's Golf VR. And that is just great. If you've ever played on a Nintendo Wii, the golf game, you know golf is not for everyone. I know that. But if you set yourself in VR and have actually great things happen around you with actual surround sound and, for example, dinosaurs on that level, it definitely gets more exciting. I had great fun with the game. It can be made much easier, for example, because the hole all of a sudden is actually like a black hole. So you just put in, if you're loosely in the area, you just already hit the hole. It's not that strict necessarily, but it really is. It's a great experience, especially in VR. And one of the many great things that make the game so special are actually the caddies that have smaller interactions with you. Like, for example, when your caddy says, hey, you know what? Like in the middle of the game, let's just wait somewhere and enjoy the view. Or it says, we have a shortcut, do you want to take that? So yeah, Everybody's Golf VR. If you have a VR headset, get this game. It is actually fantastic.
Sea of Solitude.
Coming up to another indie game, which is actually more, thoughtful and a little bit sad in a way even. Sea of Solitude was one of the greatest experiences that I had in 2019 that has actually put me through some real emotions. I heard some critics saying it's maybe not the best, and of course the speakers having German accents could be putting off. I know, me as a German I felt okay with it, but I also enjoyed it in English willingly to see how most of you out there would experience this game. It only takes 3 hours to finish, but Sea of Solitude takes you through some really great relationships from one person to another and has to experience some great moments where you really get into conflict with yourself partially. For people like me that went through some troubling times, and probably everyone did, it's actually a great experience. Through the topics of divorce, bullying and depression, it does make me feel and think a lot. And even after I finish it, I still think a lot about it. So Sea of Solitude also one of the greater experiences in 2019.
Heave Ho.
Okay. If you're not in the mood for sad and depression, I get that. Here's the one last recommendation for 2019. Get yourself Heave Ho. Especially at the time of recording right now, you can get Heave Ho for free if you have Amazon Prime and go on Twitch and download Heave Ho for free. Just a little shout out and thing that you may not have known yet. Heave Ho is this great swinging game basically. You just swing from A to B and try to get from the start of a level to the end. It does get actually very fun if you play it with up to 4 people together in local multiplayer. Because then the level gets a little bit bigger and you definitely need help from your friends. It's not just, swing on a, basic swing. Sometimes you just have to swing on your friend over to make enough momentum to get everyone over to the end goal. Everyone has to reach it, so that makes it even more interesting. And of course, you can just play some tricks with your friends, like kicking them off the platform willingly. It's great fun, and Heave Ho definitely deserves your time checking it out. Again, get yourself some friends together with it, but afterwards you will definitely feel sometimes a bit of spite, but also a lot of fun when playing this game. With many things in the past year, besides overbearing microtransactions, there's one thing that really annoys me a little bit. And it's that series don't need new entries every year. And some series could just better end. I know I only speak for myself, and if you like these games that are in this section here, feel free to enjoy them. I'm not here to forbid anything. I just want to point out a few things that personally annoy me, and maybe you feel the same. For example, on my end, I'm just done with Battle Royale games. Like Fortnite's cool, PUBG is cool. It's just, sometimes I feel like, okay, the time of Battle Royales is over, unless it's really innovative and different. For example, Tetris 99, that was great. I feel like Battle Royale games, just as a mode, has reached its peak. And if it's not changing some basics, as a whole, this shooter mode will die out very quickly again. The only good thing that we had last year in Battle Royale game releases after the big boom in 2018 was of course Apex Legends. And while that has seen its own, crunch time next to also Epic, forcing their developers to overdo themselves and talking about bodies that need replacements when developers were suffering under burnout, just so a new Fortnite update could be done very quickly, it's really making me think like, okay, maybe we as consumers should take a step back. But not everyone's of course on that wagon, so we'll see how that goes in 2020. But again, sometimes I feel like on one side, Battle Royale games are over for me, and on the other side, because we've seen so many bad things relating to developer and crunch time and stories like that, I can't really play these games with a good conscience. I'd like to know your opinion down below in the comments, what you think about them. If you're one of these people that say, oh, game development, that's a dream come true, you shouldn't complain, get out. These are real people with real needs, okay? And if they are suffering, that is never a good thing. You can burn out doing what you love, and especially then you actually burn out. Now that's just a side note, okay? But there's also one more thing about sequels that I also want to talk about that I'm over with. For example, games like Kingdom Hearts 3, Rage 2, Crackdown 3, and so many more get sequels where they don't necessarily should get one, especially when they don't further propel the story. I know Kingdom Hearts 3 on its own actually finished at least a part of its story. It still goes on into more games later on, fair enough, but then you hear things like Shenmue 3, which get a huge Kickstarter funding, additional funding from other projects, and then after 20 years not even finishing the story that they started, and then maybe doing a spin-off in the Shenmue universe, but just making a sequel just in order to make more sequels in the future. That's sounding at least annoying to me. And especially like with Shenmue 3 and other games like Kingdom Hearts, I also noticed that I've outgrown them. And again, I think this is a very personal take, and not that. It's very me-centric. If you still like the games that you also liked when you were, I don't know, a teenager, that's great. But I personally have moved on. And sometimes I really wish I'd see, rather than, a sequel of what we've seen before, rather a new take on those things that were actually great. Experiences should evolve further and further, just as new gameplay ideas are. VR is coming around bigger and bigger. I know not everyone has VR abilities or hardware for that, that's a different story. But at least slowly we're moving on into new sections. And especially if you look at Valve, from all those people who has not done anything in regards to Half-Life, coming out soon with Half-Life Alyx, making it a VR exclusive title, that is interesting. And I hope we see a little bit more of that into the future as well. And while I'm on the topic, let's also address a different thing, and that are the huge amount of remasters. Wow, 2019 was filled with them. And just as a thing, regarding sequels to games that maybe don't need one, I feel especially remasters sometimes are a thing that could be skipped. I know there's great things coming in 2020, which is all to talk about, like the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which basically is a completely different game from what we've had back when it originally released. But sometimes remakes are really just there to cash in on old things and maybe bringing people into new nostalgia, I don't know. Point is, with the huge amount of remasters that we had, sometimes I definitely think we could have gotten a rather new game instead. Just a quick glance at the list that we had in 2019, we have Catherine full body remaster with a little bit of new aspects, with a new person. Resident Evil 2, great, no question. But again, wasn't really that necessary. Medieval, could just get that as a PlayStation title. Ghostbusters the video game, I don't know why even. Crash Team Racing Nitro Food, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, Ni no Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch, Metal Wolf Chaos XD, World of Warcraft Classic. That's actually a good point. Get WoW Classic, I'll let that stand. That's okay, because you can't get that experience anymore in 2019. Because that's an ongoing live game. But these other titles, like Panzer Dragoon, The Eternal Castle, The Raven, Assassin's Creed 3, Final Fantasy 8, Final Fantasy 10, 10-2, Sniper Elite V2, The Last Remnant, Yakuza 3 and 4, Card Scratchers, Commandos 2 and Praetorians, they don't necessarily would have needed that remaster treatment. Again, ports and a little bit of polishment from one console generation from the past into the current generation, that's cool. And I don't mean that's bad. I'm just wanting to point out there's so many of them. One point though, especially again about Yakuza in this list, I gotta mention, they're doing great. They're doing new games as well as remasters. So I see there's lots of good points for that. But let me know in the comments down below what you think about that. Do you also want to have a remaster for every old game that you had in the past? Or would you rather have a cool new game? Maybe a sequel? I don't know. I still would have wished for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 that was actually good. Didn't happen, and now that license is gone from Activision. And we got instead a mobile game, which was okay. But again, could have rather played a cool Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game actually on PC and console. Just making a point. Oh, and one more thing. Halo on PC. Well, that's a whole different story. Let's talk about ongoing games and game development. I didn't want to gush over Rainbow Six Siege again after last year, but it has to be said, it is still one of the greatest, still ongoing supported games out there. Next to Counter-Strike Global Offensive, of course, which just saw its change last year from a paid model to a free-to-play model with some premium features, and including Battle Royale mode. That and Rainbow Six Siege are still one of the finest, at least shooting and team play experiences out there, especially on PC. I always know when there's an evening where we can play that game together, I definitely know I'll have a great time. So just a shout out to both of these games. They're great. And maybe you want to play it on our Discord if you want. thenewbyte.com/Discord. Okay, that was corny. On the other hand, I also want to give a big shout out to the guys of Yacht Club Games. Their ongoing releases with the Shovel Knight game are just fantastic. Since 2014, the game was released on Nintendo 3DS, Wii U, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Windows, Fire OS, Mac OS, and Linux. And the game has 4 campaigns. The main one, of course, called Shovel of Hope, and then the free DLC that we had, the free DLC, Plague of Shadows, Spectre of Torment, and King of Cards. And if you own Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, you got all of that for free actually. It is just great. The whole thing is a fantastic release which still gets new DLC as mentioned, and it has just so much cool content and playtime overall. It even has some specific regional differences based on what the consoles at that time had in differences, considering the NES consoles in the Japanese version and the European/American version. It's a great set of games and stories, and I can't wait to see what's next from Yacht Club Games. Now that their initial Kickstarter campaign collection has been done, what will come next? I'm be sure it will be something great. And while we're here, one note also has to be said about No Man's Sky. I mean, it's a little bit cliche and dangerous to support a game that initially was released under false promises, basically, and it's basically just set out to be patched into a completely different game, which then makes sense. But the thing is, with No Man's Sky, we never got asked for a dime after the initial price. It's actually cool to see that developers, if they fuck up, at least, they try to improve on it for free sometimes. Because I can't complain if a game releases first and it's bad, and then a few years later it comes out with great free expansions, DLCs, and of course updates, which you can get for no, again, asking price. And especially now with PlayStation VR, I really love to jump back into No Man's Sky again. The basic principles are still there, but it was enhanced through crafting, of course, actual multiplayer, and again also with VR capabilities. So kudos to Sean and his team of Hello Games. Great work on No Man's Sky, especially with last year's releases, and yeah, congratulations for moving on, even after those hard times, I guess, after the initial release of No Man's Sky. There was this one thing that I definitely need to talk about, and I know it's a little bit cliche. I mentioned it in the beginning. This one event that happened in January of 2019 was a very big motion, and that was actually Bungie leaving Activision and taking the Destiny IP with them. Thanks to some great funding, of course, also from investors like NetEase from China, but also other sources, Bungie actually managed it to get out their 10-year contract with Activision, which was, I think, around 8 years by now, not counting from the beginning of the release of Destiny, but of course counting from the initial development start of Destiny as an IP. Now with Bungie being free and Destiny to actually be an indie game, so many great opportunities have opened up. We have now cross-save at least, cross-play could come in the future, and it moved away from Battle.net over to Steam. And we are so happy as at least a player base, because wow, what else happened with Activision Blizzard this past year? Quite a few things. So yeah, it actually feels great to still be playing Destiny 2. I know, not all the releases that we had in the past 5 years were the best, but especially with Destiny 2 Forsaken and Shadowkeep this season, I guess, it's actually worth it still going in. Having so much fun with friends, and the longer the game goes on, the more there's to do. They actually seeing more and more problems of too much content, partially at least, because everything needs a little bit of updates and fixing, and Bungie acknowledged it themselves shortly before Shadowkeep releases. But this freedom of how to deal with the game and how to market it, and of course how to monetize it, is now all in the hands of Bungie. And I'd rather support Bungie than also the man behind Bungie, called Activision and Blizzard, with Bobby Kotick at the hat. Gosh, because what we've seen shortly after January in 2019 was a big thing that happened so often in 2019. So we move directly, dynamically, into the next section of all the people that were laid off in 2019, and my god, there's many. So first off again, after Bungie left Activision and the first financial quarter was announced, Activision and Blizzard had such an enormous growth in the last year, and then they let go 775 people. It must be great to be the CEO, because then probably you don't need to care. And the CEO, Bobby Kotick, alongside with Andrew Wilson, was also later in the year announced as one of the top overpaid CEOs of 2019, with multiple millions basically being outsourced too much. Not on accident, but just because how the contracts are being handled compared to what the average, worker in the company is earning. And there's so many more cases going on, I can just only list them here on the side, but another notable mention, of course, as I've already talked about Andrew Wilson, and of course EA alongside. EA also announced another 350 people being let go, also from EA. Then there's GameStar, actually, that is still a thing, and they own also the Game Informer publishing. And their magazine loses half of their stuff. Game Informer itself closes around 100 locations in the US, and so many more things. And they're really struggling to continuing in this digital age of purchasing. I mean, again, have you seen a GameStop where you actually bought a game instead of a Funko Pop figurine? I know I didn't. But overall, it really shows that being a game developer in 2019 is really a little bit stressful. There are, of course, lots of companies where it's great to work in, where you feel safe in your job, but in many cases you still also feel like, wow, there's the harassment cases at Riot Games, which are also terrible, and then there's these job insecurity things that happen all over the place, with EA, Activision just being two prime examples, of course. One big notion that had to be made last year, and hopefully gets even stronger this year, is we need the people to unionize. Because that's the only way how they can get a little bit of protection and sanity in this crazy, ever so fast changing market. But maybe I'm alone with this view. I mean, we're European, established channel here, European people mostly. But if you think differently, let me know in the comments down below. You won't be, treated differently just because you think people shouldn't unionize, but know that you might not find many friends with that opinion. It's just what it is. So, yeah, after this more sad part of the video, I have to say, it doesn't continue on much better, because here's the biggest meh of 2019 for me. Again, like looking back at 2019, I initially thought this wasn't a good year for games. But I hope so far overall, I also gave you many points where you hopefully got an inclination that it's not all bad. But some aspects definitely are, and we need to handle them hopefully in some way. And even if it just comes down to not purchasing that game in order to make a point with your wallet. Who knows? I mean, what can you just say about things like EA treating loot boxes as surprise mechanics and actually ethical handling of monetization, which is absolutely ridiculous. I get this. This isn't a very simple thing to just ban all loot boxes, but calling them surprise mechanics, this way of speaking, we heard that a few decades ago, but things were spoken of in a much more positive light than they actually were, and actually led to more devastating things afterwards. So I really hope, at least for 2020, we hear less stories from people paying over 10k in whatever the currency is in a free-to-play game, basically. Because I really would love to hear less stories of these scrutinizing and really predatory monetization ways. But what I actually also want to talk about is Nintendo. We need to talk. You really have been slacking on the past year. I know the Nintendo Switch is doing rather great. There's great releases on there, especially from the indie market. It's like putting extra gold on a release. But from your original titles, last year was a bit lacking. I know we have afterwards also look out into 2020, where we see, of course, Animal Crossing. That's a cool release that I want to play. But there's other things that were also feeling a little bit more meh. I know many people love Link's Awakening on the Nintendo Switch, and I get it. I liked it myself. But at the same time, I was also thinking, my god, what an overpriced title. Could have just sold it for 40 euros maybe. At the same time, you released Luigi's Mansion 3, which I get is not for everyone. But there were so many other things that were released in 2019 which were also not that great, at least for me personally. So I know, again, it's more of a me thing. Hope in 2020 Nintendo releases some better games on Nintendo Switch. That's what I would also love to play. We'll see. And on the other side we have Ubisoft, for example, releasing two rather, I don't want to call them even mediocre anymore, it's just boring games. Division 2, boring. Ghost Recon, Breakpoint, still kind of boring. And other things like Google Stadia just being the worst release that we've ever seen in the tech market so far, from one of the biggest competitors in that market that we've seen so far. Google Stadia on its own is just, it's a shame. It doesn't work really well. It only works on specific, devices, and it's very expensive. There's no subscription model, which you would actually expect, But instead, you have to pay for many games also individually, where there is sometimes a good offer, but then on the other side, you look at all the things that Google has shut down, and you don't really know if this will work out as a customer. I am a customer of Google Stadia. I still have, I think, 1 month left of this premium thing, and I haven't given anyone my buddy pass because nobody's really interested in it. It's a shame that you can't really enjoy it in the best way possible with that cool controller that you give me on any other platform than just the Chromecast Ultra. I'd love to play it on another phone, which I know definitely should work, but you're limiting it right now only to Pixel 3 and 4 devices, which is kinda limiting overall. And even if I have an actual Chrome browser in front of me, I can only use the controller through USB, and it loses all the advantage that you've told me are in this cool controller. So Google Stadia, please. Hurry the F up and get your things sorted. Because I really would love to see a cool streaming thing happening with you. You are one of the biggest companies out there. But I'm so disappointed in you more than in anything else that we've seen so far in 2019. You're Google, for God's sake. Do something greater with Google Stadia than what we've seen since November. There's only one more thing worse than Google Stadia in 2019. And frankly, I guess that's obvious, right? Anthem. One of the more cooler, a little bit weird, you don't know what's happening with it, they couldn't really show you much about the game before release. It was a release that's definitely, mysterious. Sounded great, it's by the makers of Dragon Age and Mass Effect, these big titles. Mass Effect Andromeda already wasn't great, but you were still hoping, at least, in 2019, at the beginning, that Anthem could be a great thing, that competitor next to Destiny. Then Destiny went independent, and Anthem came out, and it was just seriously such a boring game. And it wasn't necessarily because the people at the bottom at Bioware were bad at developing, designing everything. It was more a mixture of bad leading and staff problems. People coming in and out at different times, having different creative ideas about what Anthem should be, and especially the renaming shortly before E3 of 2018 didn't really help, of course, for both the morality and of course the general understanding of what Anthem is. There was talk about Magic from inside sources after we heard the initial report of Kotaku about how Anthem was developed and what a cluster F it was actually. And it's so sad to see this game shortly after release being fallen off from anyone's table, not getting any support, and by now basically being dead. There's not much happening anymore with Anthem. So Anthem is not a thing that should be blamed. It should not be blamed on the people that were actually developing the game. It's just a really showing sign of how the industry has a bigger problem, or how Anthem is the product that is basically the biggest symptom of them all, that we need to change something. So a little bit only with Bioware, because Bioware Magic doesn't exist. They should finally realize that. And for Dragon Age 4, good luck with that release, everyone there. Hopefully it will be great. So yeah, I hope they figure these things out, and I hope that the industry as a whole gets an idea how to do things better in the future. But Anthem really is that big pile of goo that you would rather forget about, which makes it in my book the worst game of 2019. But let's not waste the time with that. Let's look into the future. 2020 is here, finally. So what are the greatest games of 2020 that we'll see and that we've heard so far that will release this year? Here's the best upcoming games of 2020.
What you interfere with now is bigger than you can imagine.
The highways in my head, organic shell I ever shed. I see the world in neon red, like human hues that I have led. Sanguine and scarlet are the lights out in the spread. They flicker over roads ahead. I see the world in neon red.
What the hell are you doing here?
The mind and the spirit amplified, running out on the edge, running out on the edge, to break every limit, maximize, running out on the edge, running out on the edge. Whether by wire or spinning land.
What was his name again?
Cloud.
There is no techno evolution for the dead. Psychotic dreams arise in dread. I see the world in neon red.
Nobody do something this crazy just for money.
The mind and the spirit amplified, running out on the edge, running out on the edge, to break every limit.
core cells are fried. Auto shutdown. Triggering survival mode. Okay. If you can hear me in there, I hope you're ready. Please don't die.
The mind and the spirit and the fight. Running out on the edge, running out on the edge. To break every limit that's of mine. Running out on the edge, running out on the edge. I see the world in neon red. Wake the fuck up, samurai. We have a city to burn.
How did you like that? Were games included that you don't like? Or was there something missing that's coming in 2020 that you would love to have seen here? Let me know in the comments down below. We're coming to the final part of this video. Let's talk about the greatest experience that I had in 2019. Again, a deeply personal take, so don't be offended if it's something that you don't like. I know there's differences, but really to me, in 2019 there was only one game that really made me feel good about gaming again. I was going through a really dry phase where I wasn't really feeling like gaming was the thing that I wanted to do anymore. And that says a lot, because I invested a lot of money into it because I just really loved it. But over the years, as I made it clear in this video hopefully a lot of times, things just get stale and boring, and you know, really in a way I feel like the way how big publishers treat games is just ongoing monetization. They're not considered games anymore, art. Sometimes they just come down to products, you know, profits. And then there's this cool thing in the indie market happening where still some really great games come forth, which is what I dedicated, of course, my best games of 2019 for. But this is one thing in the middle, which is rather, you know, AAA title priced, fun a little bit better, and of course made by one of the best game directors of our time. I'm talking, of course, about Death Stranding. I get it. We had a comment here on this channel actually where somebody said Kojima should go back to Konami and work on Metal Gear Solid again. But I personally disagree. I think Death Stranding was one of the greatest things that we've seen in gaming of 2019. It was one of the most controversial ones and one of the most discussed ones at least. Because it was actually something that made the people think. Even if you don't like it, I get it, it's fine. Not everyone wants to build a game where you travel through America, building things and delivering packages. That's not the most cool idea, I get that. But for the people who, like me, have at least some point, they say, I kind of feel like not shooting anyone, I kind of feel like making something good. And Death Stranding was that one thing where I really felt like it's different. Including cool aesthetics, you know, cool soundtrack selection with Low Raw being one of the more prominent ones, and of course many cool actors, which I really appreciated, and of course the overall ending and solution of the story, which touched me very deeply after 70 hours of game time. It was cool to actually do stealth, because in Metal Gear Solid, when you didn't do stealth, you could still do a lot of things. But in Death Stranding, where you failed stealth between all these BTs, you were really in a bad place, and combat wasn't the best answer actually to it. Death Stranding is a game about father and son actually. It's a game about the aftermath, one of the biggest catastrophes happening to the world, and tying it also in with a little bit of a real world lore. And even after these big changes, you know, in our life, we could still move on. It's like an After Doom movie, you know, it's like Mad Max, but different, and it's kind of stylish in its way. Death Stranding is a game about death and life. It was the most fun I ever had in a game in a long time actually. Mostly I'm one of the players who sees promised game time of 40 hours and thinks, well, this isn't really filled with good things. I'd rather do something else than spending time in there and not getting much out of it. But in Death Stranding, I happily played over 100 hours in 2 runs of the game, on different difficulties, for example. And when I wrote this very script, actually, I longed to play more Death Stranding again, just because it feels good to build something bigger. Death Stranding is a game about sadness, but also about building, structure, strategy, and a little bit of magic. And this is a very cool mixture, which I've been missing. I didn't know that I was missing it, because it was new, because it was something that I haven't seen before done in that manner. Sure, it may collapse on itself if you take it too serious, that's fair, but again, it is made from one of the coolest directors out there, with interesting ideas about how the world functions. I don't necessarily agree with every one of them, but there's so many smaller things. There's mini arcs in there hidden, and you need to find out about them through different aspects of the game that I really felt, wow, this is something special. There's this one character in the game who's an elderly. For all the playtime, he's just a little bit old, you know, living on his own. You don't really think much about connecting everyone. After the game, after some time, he died. And then we think, wow, even if the game's finished, there's some world in this game still going on. There's another story where there was a couple. You helped finding this couple together again after they fought about each other. They were dead after a terrorist attack. And then they wanted to marry each other. They got through problems. The girl moved back to its mother. They were separated for a while. And then they got back together again. There's some really cool things in there. And you may never hear about them because they are not part of the main story. Not many people talk about these cool moments in a game like this, because if they don't like the main thing, why would they even spend more time with it at all? So Death Stranding in a way is a game about stranding, and it does make sense afterwards if you think a little bit about that. At least to me, I made up my mind about it. And Kojima's kind of right. Stranding is a mechanic, and it's really cool if your personal taste matches what the game is offering. I personally am looking forward to more in the future. Maybe even a multiplayer Death Stranding title. That could be actually very cool. For me, it's not necessarily the best game of 2019, but it's the best time I had with a game in 2019. It was one of the coolest experiences and one of the more unique ones that I had. And especially being released in November, it was fantastic for these darker months where it's cold, dark again, and you know, you feel a little bit lonely overall. And then it really helped getting loads of likes from strangers because you helped them build one structure that helped them further improve their delivery line. It sounds weird, but it is absolutely true. I kind of feel good about it. Right, so we're actually getting to the end of the video, but before we end this, it feels actually bad to be alone here, so I'm gonna just hang on.
Hello everyone, I hope you had a nice holidays, and of course we all wish you from Team B a lovely 2020 and Happy New Year. You can also say something.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Bye.
Feels good to be back. So yeah, that has been the video games of 2019. What did you think? Was it an okay video? I hope it was. I hope you got some entertainment out of it and maybe some new ideas to think about. I personally have to say, 2019 was a great game. Yeah, it was a great year in gaming. Completely different. And 2020 will just be greater. For me personally, especially, there's lots of things changing, you know, in my private life. I'm really excited for the opportunities. And on YouTube, there's one more thing. I'm not leaving the new Byte, and the new Byte won't be cancelled or anything. But I will also additionally start doing a single channel again on my own, where I want to do retrospectives. It's something that I was thinking about a lot when I was consuming them in 2019, and I was thinking this is a cool new challenge that I want to do. Focusing on just one game per month, writing a lot about it, figuring out the history about it, and making it one comprehensive an hour to an hour and a half long video. Talking about the game, making the love that I feel for this game also turn into a video that may transfer this love that I had over to you, the viewer. It's something that I really look forward to doing, and it will be very satisfying in a way. I don't know. It's cool to do something different. I'm also looking forward to this year going to Gamescom again, and so many other things. So there's lots of things, of course, still happening. And I'm also looking forward to also continue my work with Emily and Dan, and also Liz. So yeah, again, I hope you liked this video. I'll see you soon again. Thanks for watching. Have a great 2020. Happy New Year, and see you soon. Bye-bye.